like I said, went out. We know that we have a few missing from us this morning, and as they travel, and we have those that have been ill, so we want to remember those in our prayers this morning. We're going to start Genesis chapter 43 this morning, and of course it's a continuation about Jacob and his sons and Joseph, and about the events that's transpired between them and Joseph that is in Egypt as prime minister over Egypt. And last week we talked about in Genesis chapter 42 that there was Joseph and his brothers that went down to buy food, and Joseph recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. And we know that he made some demands on them about when they were to come back about buying food, and that was to bring the younger brother with them, which would be Benjamin, and that is Joseph's younger brother by Rachel. And so Benjamin had a very special place in Joseph's heart because of the way that he loved Rachel. And of course we know that they get their food, and they go back to the land of Canaan. They tell and rehearse to their father what had happened, and they had left Simeon behind. And of course Jacob was distraught about that, and now they want to take, if they have to go back, Benjamin with them. And of course we know we ended chapter 42 out about the grief that was bringing upon Jacob. And in verse 38 he said, "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in which ye go, then ye shall bring down my gray hair with the sorrows to the grave." So this made Jacob very despondent and very unhappy and very disappointed. Now if you go back and look at all this, you can kind of see why, because it seems like every time Jacob put his trust in these boys by Leah, somebody came up on the short end of the stick. First it was Joseph. Now they had been down to Egypt to buy grain, and they came back without Simeon. And now they want to take Benjamin back if they go back. So you can kind of see Joseph's standpoint from a human standpoint of view. It's kind of like, man, every time I see some of y'all off, one of you don't come back. I mean, something going on here. Now something's wrong with this picture. So you can kind of see how, and of course, he didn't know that Joseph was still alive, and he didn't know the whole story behind Simeon and him staying. So, when you don't know the whole facts and story behind things, it does make you a little bit in a state of wonderment, doesn't it, about what is going on here. And so we find we're going to pick up in chapter 43, and we'll read a few verses of that and make some comments. And in chapter 43, the very first verse, and we talked about that famine. And the famine was sore in the land. Now when you see the word sore, that means it's difficult, isn't it? It's rough, it's bad. And it's going to be 7 years of famine. And by the way this is written, it looks like the first year of the famine is when they went down on the first trip, and this is the second year of the famine. And unbeknownst to them, and I guess only unbeknownst to Joseph, it's going to be about 5 more years of this before things get any better. And so in the midst of this famine, though, we're going to find that the children of what will become the children of Israel, Jacob and his family, are going to be moved into the land of Canaan, and the land of Egypt, and be given the best of the land in order to live and to grow and to prosper there. But that famine was sore. That's one of the things that I don't know anything about, and I'm sure that maybe Brother Colin may know something about it, but what a famine is like. I know we see it on the news and we see it in other countries, and basically when you say the word famine, that means without food. And you can survive a little while without food, but you won't survive very long. So food is a critical source of us living, isn't it? And we're going to find that grain in particular is a staple of our food source, isn't it? Just like it was with them. It refers to corn here. Well, when you look at it today, corn is a very prominent part of our food source. Also, wheat is a very prominent source of our food. And when you look at the directions on most packages that's dealing with grain or even with other products and bread, what do you find the preponderance of? Grain. We know corn is also used to make syrups and other byproducts. It's used in other foods and stuff like that. So they're a prominent food source that we have when you go to talking about these types of things. And so it was back there. This famine is so in the land. It's gotten really bad. That statement's also made in Genesis chapter 41, in verse 57. We find that Joseph was so prosperous in his storing of this grain. It was heaped down, running over without measure. Had to quit numbering it. It was so great, the excess was. And so we find in the 57th verse that the grain was so prosperous in Egypt that all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was sore in the land. So it was a bad famine. And so we find that it came to pass, verse 2, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again, buy us a little food. And so we find that they had already eaten up that grain. And you know, it looked like they had brought back quite a bit, on their pack items and stuff, but you know, when that's all you got, probably doesn't take too awful long to run through it, does it? Because there's nothing to replenish it. As you eat it away, it's going away. And so we find that he's going to send them back. And one of the things you're going to start to see here, Judah is taking on more of a leadership role. You can kind of see a change of heart in Judah in this thing. You know, it was Judah that recommended they get rid of their brother to start with. You know, he kind of opened that kind of worms up with that idea. Even though when he came back to the pit, he wanted to know where the brother was at. You know, it was kind of him that opened that can of worms up about let's get rid of him. Also, we know it was Judah that failed to keep his promise with his daughter-in-law Tamar, as we studied about that. And so, you know, Judah had some problems himself, didn't he? But as you see here, it looks like he's starting to take on more of a prominent leadership role. And what this is doing is you're seeing a change in the heart and mind of Judah. And you're going to see that in the rest of the brothers. And that's what all these events are about. God is using these events of men to temper and to bring unto repentance these sons. And so we find Judah spake unto him, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And if thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy thee food. But if thou not send him down, we shall not go down, for the man said unto us, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And so Judah's explaining to his father now how important it is that they do what the man talking about Joseph says. And of course, we know they haven't recognized him yet as being his brother. He hasn't revealed himself unto them. So he's trying to explain to his father, it's best we don't go down there, we don't bring our brother, because the man says, you won't see my face. Well, what was so important about seeing the face of Joseph? Remember, Pharaoh had put Joseph in charge, and if you went there to bought grain, guess who you went through? Joseph. If you didn't see Joseph, then guess what you didn't get? Grain. And Joseph had already, suspected them of being spies, and he had thrown them in prison for 3 days, and we talked about that. So Judah is taking a leadership role. He is apprehensive about going back down because he understands what this man is about. He knew the sternness and he knew the fierceness of Joseph, but little did he know what that was all about the power and authority that Joseph has. And he says in verse 6, and Israel said, Wherefore dealt so ill with me as to tell the man whether ye had a brother. And so Joseph is perturbed at him. You're going to excuse me a little bit. I'm down at my back and it's kind of making me sick, to be honest with you. When I moved just then, it didn't do too hot. We're going to see what we can do. I'm going to grab the stick and see if we can continue on. Anyway, he said in verse 6, wherefore dealt ye so ill with me, hast to tell the man whether you had brothers. So Jacob's a little bit disappointed in him. And you know, you can kind of see his point as the head of the household. And you know, we kind of do that today to a certain extent when we're dealing with the unknown and people that's unknown. We don't really tell them a whole lot about our family and where we live and things of that nature. You know, a lot of times that can be a little risky because you don't know the overall motive about people and what they're up to. And so that's why Jacob's a little bit perturbed. Why did you even bring all that up? I sent you down there to buy grain, and you brought all that into the picture. And of course, it has to do with the closeness that Jacob is to Benjamin. And so, you know, he felt like they had dealt ill with him. He said, you have betrayed me. That's what he felt like. He had been betrayed. And they said, the man asked us straight out our state. You know, really what Jacob was saying, what Judah is saying here is, you know, the man kind of caught us off guard. We weren't expecting him to get into the personal side of things. You know, we was expecting this to strictly be a business transaction, and maybe him asking what country you're from, and maybe from Canaan, and go on about it. But he straightly asked us straight out. And that kind of caught him off guard. Of our kindred. He wanted to know if our father was yet alive. Have you another brother? And so we told him according to the tenor of those words. Couldn't we certainly know what he would say? Bring your brother down. How was we going to know this? I mean, what has brought this home? So he did catch them off guard on that thing, and that was done too to see what kind of story they going to tell. This was to try their heart. You know, he knew the whole story behind what had went on because he was so directly involved in it, wasn't he? And so we find that Judah said unto Israel his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we, thou, and also our little ones. And so Judah now says, listen, send the lad with me. We need to go down there. We need to buy food. We need to buy food for our families. The lad's going to be okay. And, you know, just let him go. And notice verse 9. Here's where you can see the leadership part really beginning to shine or show up in Judah. Notice what he says here. I will be surety for him. Wow. I will be surety for him. You know, surety is like a guarantee. Maybe it's a way that we look at it a lot of times as a type of collateral. Said, you know, I'll be the guarantee that he'll be okay. I'll be the one that will take the blood of the blame and the heartache if anything happens. I will be surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. So Judah is taking on the responsibility. Kind of strange, isn't it? That is a 180-degree turn, isn't it? You know? So you can start to see that the leadership part of Judah is starting to come out. For except we had lingered, surely we had returned the second time. And so he says, you know, if we had lingered down there, the man had let us go. He did keep sending, and so we're able to go back. You know, there was a possibility early on that Judah and his brothers thought, well, he done throw us in prison. This man's going to have us done away with. But he didn't, did he? He didn't. And their father Israel said unto them, if it must be so now, do this. Take the best fruits in the land, in your vessels, carry down the man a present, a little balm, a little honey, spices, myrrh, nuts, and almonds, and take double money in your hands. You know, it's kind of interested in it. Okay, we need grain. Judah standing up and said he would be the surety that nothing would happen to Benjamin. Out of necessity, you know, I'm going to have to do something here or starve. And so we find, he says, now I want you to take the best fruits that we have, the best that we got, take them down to him as a present, some balm and some honey and some spices and some myrrh and some nuts and some almonds, but take double the money. You know, their money was still in their sacks, wasn't it? when they had went down the first time, the money had been put back in the sacks, and they weren't aware of it till one of them found the money that was in the sacks. And that bothered them too, about that money being in there. So Jacob says, you know, you take double the money and carry it again in your hands. Perhaps this was an oversight. You know, perhaps the money that was in the sacks, maybe somehow you forgot to give it to them, or somehow or another it got put back in the sacks. Things of that nature. Maybe Joseph or the prime minister, you know, maybe he'll overlook the incident about the money and everything. And so in verse 13, take also your brother. Take your brother, you know. Take your brother with them. Go again unto the man. So we find that Jacob now has put this together, and that they are going to go back down and take Benjamin with them. And you know, something's going to happen down there with Benjamin, and that was going to be a test too. You have to ask yourself the question, when they went to dine, and they were segregated out when they went to dine, and that's a story within itself, Benjamin got 5 times the helpings than what they got. What about that? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? What did he get 5 times the helpings, and the rest of them just got, you know, the normal portion? And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Well, I hope we'll get to that in just a little bit. And the men took, verse 15, that present, and they doubled money in their hands. Benjamin, and rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. So here they go back. They take Benjamin with them. They take all the gifts with them, and they go back down to Joseph, to Egypt, and they stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of the house, "Bring these men home." Interesting statement. You know, that's kind of a powerful statement in itself. Joseph says, "Bring these men home." You see, Joseph understood a lot bigger picture here than what they knew. And he was going to bring them home, wasn't he? That was going to be their home for a period of about 400 years, as we're going to see. So right here we can see a glimpse of what's going to happen. He said to the ruler of the house, "Bring these men home." He said, "Slave, make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon." And the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. And you know, about this dining, you can kind of see a glimpse of being brought home of Jesus, can't you? And very often we talk about some of the likenesses of Joseph and Jesus, and we find that Joseph is that type of Savior. Jesus today wants everyone to dine with him, don't he? He wants everyone to dine with him. He wants to bring everybody home, doesn't he? And yet we find that there are those that just don't want to dine with him, do they? It seems like they don't want to go home. And so we find that we can see a shadow of this in this event here. And the man did as Joseph bade, talks about the steward of his house, the overseer, and he brought the men into Joseph's house. You know, Jesus has begun to prepare a house for us, hasn't he? You know, he's going to prepare many mansions, hasn't he? And you know, just the more I think about that single street, not streets of gold, down on that street, down where we're going to live, there ain't going to be, Daniel, you living on the main street and I'm living on 4th Street. He says street, we're all going to live on the same street of gold, aren't we? Ain't going to be no side street. Ain't going to be no cul-de-sac. Ain't going to be no back street. Ain't going to be no run-down places. And so we find that bringing into Joseph's house, singular, is like being brought into the house of Jesus, into the house of God. We're going to be there. And it's going to be on that single street that is going to be in heaven, which is figuratively known. And the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, because of the money that was returned in our sacks at the first time we brought it in, that he may seek occasion against us and fall upon us and take us for bondsmen and our asses. And so they were a little suspicious about this, having that kind of hospitality laid out to them. Because, see, they were just purchasers. They were just there to buy. This was not a personal transaction, so to speak. This was strictly all business, and yet Joseph was treating them in a very unusual and personal manner. He was going the distance to show hospitality. And now, we've all have seen this dramatized, I guess, on television or in the movies all the times. The crime boss or whatever, he'll have a big feast and he'll invite the enemy in and eat. And when they get through eating, what does he do to the enemy? Takes them out, doesn't he? That's what they're thinking about here. What is going on here now? This man is bringing us into this palace and treating us like royalty and things of that nature. Now, what is going on here? And they came near to the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house, and said, "Oh, sir, we came indeed down at the first time to buy food." So now they're going to talk to the steward first. They're rehearsing the events that's going on to this steward, to this caretaker of Joseph's house. And it came to pass, when we came to the end, that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight, and we have brought it again into our hand. Hey, when we came and we stopped, when we stayed over there at the end, we found this money. Don't know how it got in there, but guess what we've done? We didn't spend it, we didn't take it, we didn't keep it, we brought it back. Another change of heart is. It sure is. And we talked about how they could have said, well, this money's here, and we done got this grain, and we done got our food, and all this will be over with in a year anyway, and we'll move on. But it wasn't over, was it? It hadn't even started good, had it? So we find that we see a change in the attitude and heart that they are displaying, and this is what this is all about. And the other money have we brought down in our hands to buy food. We cannot tell who put our money in our sacks. We can't tell who done. We don't know how this happened. And they're telling the truth. And he said, "Peace be unto you, fear not. Your God and the God of your fathers hath given you treasure in your sacks. And I had your money." And he brought Simeon out unto him. So he said, "Don't you worry about it." He said, it's kind of interesting in what he says here. The God that you serve. Now, whether this steward, being Egyptian in nature, really knew anything about the God of heaven, it's kind of questionable the way he's phrasing that. He's really telling them the God that you worship and the God that you serve blessed you with this. And it looks like he's saying, in a way, I was his servant in the process of this because I had your money. So, you can see things really start to pick up, can't you, in their attitude and actions of these brothers and the way God is using this to bring about this repentance. I'm going to pause right there. Brother Colin, you look like you had something you want to comment on.
Well, it is kind of strange that every time they refer to Joseph, they call him the man.
Right.
And but anyway, that way, it kind of sort of distances him from them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The man. And also, they don't know what's going on, with this business of the money being put in the bag, but he's trying to, this man that you just read about in verse 23, he said, I had your money, and I could have kept it, but because it's more like a treasure from God, it is strange. But Joseph knowed all the time what he was going to do. He knew all the time that this was leading right up to the time he's going to reveal himself to these brethren.
That's right.
And you're almost there, but you're not quite there yet. But you'll get there in just a few minutes.
Yeah, and kind of in these notes here,
it makes you wonder sometime by looking at some of these verses that they wouldn't become a little suspicious of what's going on, between us and the man.
Right.
But they never did.
They never did.
No, they never did.
Yeah. And there's 2 points I had in my notes here.
It'd have been the furthest thing from their imagination anyway that the man would have been Joseph.
Yeah.
They in their minds that couldn't have never been.
Right. In my note, 2 points you just brought out were in there. It's kind of interesting. It was really because of God's goodness that they had the money, wasn't it? It was a blessing from God, is what it was.
Oh, yeah.
And also, what you had brought out, the brothers received the blessing of love and kindness to Joseph without knowing who he was. The same way God showers love and blessings upon man, even when man doesn't know where the blessings are coming from.
That's right.
And that was our state, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They were getting showered with blessings and they didn't even know where it was coming from. You know? I guess that goes back to the old statement of God sends a rain on the just and the unjust, doesn't he? But the just appreciate it and know where it comes from. And so we find that the man brought the men into Joseph's house, gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their asses provender. And we're going to show, we know that's a great hospitality, and that's something we're going to see over and over in the Bible, is that a foot washing. And we find that was done out of hospitality, and also to protect your house from getting contaminated, because we know the roads back then were not like today. Animals traveled, you had dead bodies, you had dead animals, you had all kinds of things out there, and in these sandal-type shoes that they wore, it was easy for your feet to be contaminated. Well, you know yourself, you get mud on your boots, Brother Griffith, if you don't pull them off at the back door, might be some consequences if you go in the house with your muddy boots, right? Because the question you're going to get hit with, what them muddy boot prints doing on my white carpet? We don't want that, do we? Anyway, but it was a form of hospitality, a form of courtesy too. Recognizing you as a special guest, you get your feet washed and everything, and it made you feel clean too on top of that. So anyway, that was the hospitality that was shown. And we know that Jesus washed feet, didn't he? He done that to show of being a servant, of being humble and humility. Reed, I don't know about washing a bunch of those stinky feet, do you? Got to be pretty hot, got to be pretty humble, haven't you? Yeah, but that's what we are, we're supposed to be humble and have humility. Now, that doesn't mean that we're supposed to be washing feet as part of the church service. That's not the whole point. The physical cleansing is not the whole point. It's the spiritual cleansing today, in humbleness and humility. So, anyway, and they made ready the presents against Joseph. And they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. And then that bowing is again. They brought these gifts and presents just like they were supposed to, the fruits and the myrrh and the almonds and those types of things, and they bowed before him. And 17 years later, or 18 years earlier now, it was the following year, Joseph had told them this was going to happen in the dreams that he had. That one day they would bow before him, that they would serve him. And this is transpiring, and they don't even realize what's happening to the jail. They sure don't. Like Brother Kahn said, they don't even realize what's happening. And he asked them of their welfare, and said, is your father well? The old man of whom you speak, is he yet alive? As Brother Kahn said, this should have been a tip-off, him inquiring about the family. That is kind of unusual. You can find something else unusual about this. The Egyptians, we're going to find, segregated themselves from all other countries around about them when they went to eat. And that's real interesting about that. That's been a problem throughout the ages, hasn't it? We know when we go over into the New Testament, Peter had to be corrected about such things. And yet we're going to find that it held true in the Egyptians' culture, and because Joseph was not an Egyptian, they separated from him when they ate. It's kind of interesting, isn't it, when you take a look at it, at what's going on here. And so we find they bowed their heads, and he lifted up his eyes, and he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your younger brother of whom you spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. So he recognized Benjamin. That's his only fleshly younger brother in this. You know, and here again, with the conversation, the way it's taken, you know, somebody gets too inquisitive about our personal life, we're gonna start asking questions, aren't we? So Joseph's really interested about them and their personal life. And Joseph, verse 30, made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brothers, and he sought for to weep. And he entered his chamber, and he wept there. And so we find that Joseph, he really wanted to tell them, didn't he? He really wanted to. So he went aside, back to his chamber, and he wept. He wanted to tell them so bad who he was. But you know, with God working in this, he knew the time was not right. God had not set the time yet for him to tell them. There were some other things that was going to have to go on to make sure that these boys had true repentance in their hearts. So Joseph went there and he wept. Think about Jesus. He wept, didn't he? Think about Jesus when he was looking over Jerusalem, and he said, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem." He said, I have called, and I would have been like a mother hen to her chicks and gathered you under my wing. So we can kind of see the same impact of this going on here. And so he washed his face, went out, refrained himself, and said, sit on bread. So he went out, he refrained himself, and he said, okay, now it's time to eat. And this is kind of going to get interesting in verse 32. Notice how they ate here, and when you look at the Egyptian culture at this time, Egypt, because of their culture and because of their gods, they thought that they themselves had descended for the various gods that they worshiped. They felt like Egypt did, that everybody else around them was inferior. And so they wouldn't eat one. And we find this even with Joseph, they separated from him. And you think about, well, why would they separate themselves from Joseph? He's prime minister. But one of the things you got to remember, Joseph's not Egyptian. He's Hebrew. And they knew that he was not of their culture, that he was brought there as a slave. But their culture dictated that they act in this manner. And notice what it says here. So Joseph, being prime minister, in a sense is rejected by the Egyptians, isn't he? In general. Think about Jesus in the same manner. Was he rejected because of who he was? Yeah. The rejection's there. Actually, Jesus went to those that were rejected, you know. And so we find that these things are about to transpire. We're going to see that the Egyptians practiced a type of exclusionary things, kind of like what Peter did when he would separate himself, wouldn't he, from those that were circumcised. Barnabas too was almost caught up in that, wasn't he? And they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians would yet eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrew. Notice what it says here. For that is an abomination unto the Egyptians. A lot of prejudicial feelings there, wasn't it? A lot of that still goes on, doesn't it? I mean, it's not unusual, it's not uncommon to have people have to deal with it. They had to deal with it back then. I mean, they were to the point to where it was, strictly adhered to. And so they segregated them out. You know, Joseph, he was sitting over here, and you had the Egyptians over here, and you had the boys over here. You know, that's getting pretty bad, isn't it? When it's like that. And yet, you would think him being prime minister, it wouldn't be that way. But what you got to remember, though, Joseph, to a great extent, had assimilated into the Egyptian culture. He had picked up a lot of their practices and things of that nature. So that's what you have to remember here. You know, he didn't have God's law like we have God's law today. All that was still unfolding. You know, God was still speaking directly to the heads of household, the fathers and the prophets, wasn't he? So they didn't have it like we have it today, had it laid out and we can do it in picture form and stuff. But this is what's going on. And yet we find that in Jesus' day, who did he tell them to go to? You know, Jesus used a parable about fixing a great supper. And he invited those to come, but they wouldn't come, would they? So what did Jesus say? Don't you worry about that. You go out to the highway and the byways. You go out there that which is looked down upon. You bring them in. And in a sense, you know, this is what Joseph is doing. He's bringing in them that is looked down upon. It's what he's doing. He himself is looked down upon in the Egyptian culture because he was Egyptian. But if you look at what he's doing here, he's actually bringing them in from the byway and the highway, isn't he? It's kind of a shadow, really. It's kind of a picture of what was going to come. You also see here maybe that which is rejected of men has become the chief cornerstone. Would it be fair to say that at this point in time, now that Joseph is the chief cornerstone in Egypt, without him you're going to die? And yet, being the chief cornerstone, you still see him rejected by the Egyptian culture, don't you? Was Jesus rejected by the Judo-Roman culture? Yeah. Let me read that line. Any of you brothers want to comment on that? I tried to cover it in a way where we can kind of maybe get some understanding out of it, but that's what that's about. And they set before him the firstborn. Now, notice how he's going to do this. How did he know to line them up like this at their table? And they set before him the firstborn according to his birthright, the youngest according to his youth, and the men marveled one at another. How did he know this? You know, they needed to start thinking in a different manner. Wait a minute, how did he know this? How did he know to align us by our birthright? How did he, what's going on here? And this is what it says in the very next verse. And they set before him the first, in the end of this verse. And the men marveled one at another. That is something that you can imagine how they were looking at each other going, how did this man know this? How did he know to line us up? You know, after all the quizzing and questioning, you know, there were some questions in their heart when you go back and look a couple of chapters earlier. When Jacob first told them to go down to Egypt to buy corn, they looked a puzzle on their face, didn't they? What? We got to go to Egypt? They knew their brother was in Egypt. They don't know what to come of. They just assumed being sold as a slave. He was probably out somewhere or another in the rural area and or maybe even dead. But they knew that if they went down to Egypt, they're going to be where Joseph was at. You know, they were a little afraid of this thing, you know. And here they are standing before them. And all these things are happening, you know, maybe it should have been a tip-off. Someone may ask the question, well, why didn't they recognize Joseph? Well, you know, it's been a period of 17 years. And you got to remember, Joseph's dress and mannerism would have taken on the Egyptian culture. And also maybe God was hiding it from their hearts too. Because it wasn't time for him to be revealed. That these boys had to go through a change in their life to be accepted of God. So we can look at that maybe in two manners. One, he had taken on a lot of the appearance of the Egyptian culture. And you've seen people like this that maybe you hadn't seen in 5 or 10 years. And then you just kind of think, and then all of a sudden they tell you who they are. You don't even recognize them. Maybe it's because of the way their hair is cut, maybe because they've grown a beard, maybe it's because of the apparel they're wearing, you know. The same thing here. And so we find that they marveled, and he took and sent message unto them, and before them, but Benjamin's mess was 5 times as any of theirs, and they drank and were merry with him. You know, we brought up early on about Benjamin's dinner was 5 times greater than theirs. Why was that? Well, if you remember, Benjamin had become Joseph's favorite, right? And had become Jacob's favorite. And Joseph was doing this to see how they were going to react to the favoritism in Benjamin. Were they going to react the same way? Was he going to pick up on some kind of bitterness, hate? Now there he is too. He treats him just like our daddy treats him. You know, we down here in Egypt, maybe we just need to let Joseph have him. Was that going to be the attitude that was displayed toward Benjamin like was displayed toward him? Or was the attitude changing? Well, when we see this, it says they made merry. So it seems like they were starting to be real appreciative of the blessings they were receiving, which was going to be a big key in a change of heart. And I'm going to stop right there and we'll get ready for the worship service.